Erev Tov, everyone. We have, as you might be aware, we have Shavuot coming up. Not too long. Today was Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Very, very special week that we have now. Today was Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Tomorrow, Bet B'Sivan, is the day known as Yom HaMiyuchas. That is the day on which we were told attempt Yuli Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. Following that, we have the Shloshet Yimei Hagbala, the 3 days of preparation coming up to Chag Matan Torah, and of course Shavuot. So this week we'll look at some of the halachot, some of the relevant customs and minhagim that come up regarding Shavuot. One question which is very, very relevant, comes up every year, is the question regarding Birkat Torah. So we know we've spoken in the past a little bit about Birkat Torah. Those who are in the Mincha Maariv Shiur today, so we spoke about Birkat Mazon, which is the other bracha, which is D'Oraita. According to everybody, Birkat Mazon is a bracha D'Oraita. The only other bracha, which according to many opinions is D'Oraita, is Birkat Torah. That's the brachot we say in the morning before beginning to learn Torah during the day, and that has certain ramifications by the fact that there may be D'Oraita as opposed to other brachot which are midrabanan. So the Shulchan Aruch has a very interesting seif. He says in Siman Mem Zayin, which is the section dealing with Dinei Birkat Torah, the first seif says the Shulchan Aruch, Birkat Torah tzarich lezaher b'meod. That's the entire seif. That is the entire halacha. One has to be very, very careful. Okay, so clearly there is something important, there is something significant about Birkat Torah. We know the Gemara tells us one of the reasons why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed was Mipnei shelo baruchu b'Torah tchila. Explain exactly what that means. Does it literally mean they didn't say the brachot? But clearly there's a concept, there's an underlying idea here that makes Birkat Torah very, very significant. And it's a tragedy that most of the time, we say these brachot. One of the first brachot we say in the morning, so we just kind of mumble them off. I mentioned in the Tzubah Merabanan Shiur today as well, we spoke about, I think it's a travesty of this even mentioned as a question, but we discussed at the end of the Shiur whether is brought in a certain text, where the question whether one could say Birkat Hamazon while driving. Okay. So clearly, you should not. If a person is saying Birkat Hamazon while they're driving, either they're not saying Birkat Hamazon properly, or they're not driving properly, right? Or maybe both. And that's a little bit problematic. Sometimes people are in the car, driving in the car on the way to shul. Okay, Birkat Torah, Birkat Shachar, whatever it is, you can't just mumble it off. But these are really, the Shulchan Aruch tells us, Birkat Torah tzarich lezaher b'meod. So it's difficult to concentrate. It's difficult to think about it every day in the morning. There's one day a year where we can really give it our all. One day we can think about the meaning, think about the intent. What are the brachot that we're saying? What better day is it than Shavuot, Chag Matan Torah? And yet, what's the problem? Many people stay up all night. And when you stay up all night, then we get into the question, can you say Birkat Torah? So many people stay up all night learning on Shavuot. And the one day when you have the opportunity to really say Birkat Torah with Kavanah, you don't say it. Okay, so is there a way perhaps that we can say it? Why can we not say it? So I want to look at the question of saying Birkat Torah when one has stayed up all night and one has not gone to sleep. Obviously, if one goes to sleep, comes back in the morning, you should say Birkat Torah. You should say it with Kavanah, extra Kavanah on Shavuot. But the basic question is like this, that we have very often what happens is you'll have at the early minyan one person, you'll find the person who went to sleep during the night, had a Shenat Keva, and they can say all the brachot. And one person will say all the Birkat Shachar and Motzei Yedei Chovah, everybody else. The truth is that for most of the brachot, that is not necessary. Meaning for most of the Birkat Shachar, everybody agrees that there is a new obligation to say those brachot every day, and you can say them. It's not necessary to hear from somebody else, even if you hadn't slept. Why do we do it that way? Maybe because so that people don't get confused, whatever it may be. But the only brachot where there is a question, so the bracha of Elokai Neshama and the bracha of Hamavir Sheina, those brachot cannot be said if one did not go to sleep. Brachot of Al Netilat Yadayim and Asher Yatzar, Machloket, Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, but Ashkenazim Paskin, that if one goes to the toilet in the morning and then you go wash your hands, you could say those brachot. And Birkat Torah. Birkat Torah is a question. And what is the question? Essentially, do we say, what is the nature of these brachot? Do we say that it's like the rest of, as we say them in the morning, like the rest of Birkat Shachar, that it would be a Birkat Shevach, a bracha of praise, And these brachot, Birkat HaShevach, Chazal instituted them. Here's where it gets a little bit confusing, a little bit tricky, because there's maybe a bracha deoraita, as opposed to the other brachot which are Rabbanan. But those brachot, Birkat HaShevach, Chazal instituted that they need to be said every day. So whether a person slept or not is irrelevant. Each day is a new day. All the brachot we say in the morning, etc. One would say those each and every day. So if we say that Birkat Torah is like the Birkat HaShevach and it's dependent on a new day, then what I've done before is irrelevant. But there's a new day and there is a new obligation to say those brachot. On the other hand, you might say that no, actually, what is the bracha of Birkat Torah? This is a bracha like we have at the Birkat Mitzvah. Just before you perform a mitzvah, you say the bracha, and that bracha would apply for the time that you are performing that mitzvah. But if you then stop and you have a hefsek, and then you want to come and fulfill the mitzvah again in a new way, you would say a new bracha. So, for example, on Sukkot, right, a person goes into the sukkah and makes a bracha, has their meal, has whatever it is. They leave the sukkah, they come back a few hours later, they'll say the bracha again. You had a hefsek in between. So what would that be the case when it comes to Birkat Torah? By the way, leaving aside the question of sleep or not, the Tosfot addresses this point. Tosfot says that if it's the case that Birkat Torah is a Birkat Mitzvah, so why is we only say it once in the day? Most of us are not learning all day. We do other things in between. So he says because we really do have a chiyuv to learn all day, and a person is always your mind is really always there. You never really remove yourself from that obligation of learning Torah. That once in the morning is enough. But if somebody does something which really causes a hefsek, right? If a person goes to sleep in the middle of the day and then wakes up, would they have to say the bracha again? Okay, so the two sides of the coin are: is it that when you stop, that when you have a hefsek, when you have gone to sleep, that only then when you wake up and start learning again with the new obligation to say the bracha kick in, so to speak? Or would it be that every day there's an independent obligation each day? And the nafkamina between them, actually would be two nafkaminas between them. One would be the case we're talking about of Shavuot or any other night for that matter, if a person did not go to sleep. So you haven't gone to sleep in the night, so you haven't stopped, you haven't had a hefsek. So maybe we'd say based on that, the bracha you said the previous day continues. There's no need for a new bracha. Or if we say that it's necessary to make a new bracha each day, so whether you've slept or not is irrelevant, but then you would have to. That would be one nafkamina. The other nafkamina would be if a person went to sleep during the day. Person goes, has a siesta, has a nap in the middle of the day, right? I don't mean you fell asleep during the Rabbi's drasha. I mean you went and you got into bed and you slept for an hour or two, whatever it is. That's what's called shenat keva, shenat keva bayom. When you wake up, if we say that, it would be the opposite. If we say the bracha is dependent on each day, and it's only each new day you would have a bracha, we'd say no. But if we say it's dependent on your hefsek, so the fact is you stopped, you went to sleep, you woke up, you'd say a new bracha. So those are the two sides, and this is, as you've probably all realized by now, a machloket rishonim between the Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam. So when we look at the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Mem Zayin says in Seif Yud Aleph, right? He says the following. He says, Shnat keva bayom al mitato have hefsek. If a person went to sleep during the day, that is considered a hefsek for the purposes of Birkat Torah. So that is quoting the opinion. That is the opinion of the Rosh. The Rosh says you have a hefsek during the day, you go to sleep. You would need to say a new bracha Birkat Torah when you wake up. However, the Shulchan Aruch continues. So he says that's the opinion. He says yesh omrim de lo have a hefsek. There are those who say that it is not a hefsek, right? You would not be required to say a new bracha when you wake up. V'chein nahagu, and that is the minhag. So normally when we have a stam yesh omrim Shulchan Aruch, the halacha follows stam. In this case, you have a stam and yesh omrim, but after the yesh omrim, after the second opinion, the Shulchan Aruch says v'chein nahagu. We follow the second opinion. So what's he saying? He's saying like Rabbeinu Tam, that if somebody slept during the day, they would not be required to make a new Birkat Torah when you wake up, and this is the common practice. The Mishnah Berurah points out that there are other poskim, the Gra, and others who actually say that one should say a new Birkat Torah when one wakes up, and if one wants to rely on that, they can. But I saw earlier that Rosh Hashanah said not to rely on that. The common practice, the common minhag seems to be not to. So based on that, if we're to extend that, and if we understand from there the Shulchan Aruch Paskins like Rabbeinu Tam, saying that if you sleep in the middle of the day, we don't consider it a hefsek. We don't look at hefsek for the purposes of Birkat Torah. What determines whether you need to say a new Birkat Torah or not? What determines would be whether it's a new day. Each day a new day begins, and you would therefore need to say a bracha. So based on that, we would think, right? The problem is the Shulchan Aruch does not address our case explicitly, but we would think that he would say that even if you did not sleep all night, but the next day kicks in, since we say you don't say a bracha after sleeping during the day, it's not dependent on that. It doesn't matter if you went to sleep or not. It's the fact that it's a new day, and therefore, just like Rabbeinu Tam would say, you would say a new bracha. We'd expect the Shulchan Aruch to say you can say Birkat Torah in the morning even if you haven't slept. So it points out Magen Avraham and Rabbi Kenigsberg and many other Achronim that there is a contradiction here in the Shulchan Aruch. Because what we've just said, we expect him to say that in the morning when you haven't slept, you can say Birkat Torah. So listen, the very next seif in the Shulchan Aruch, he says like this. He says, Afim lamad balayla. Person was learning at night. Halayla holech achar hayom. First of all, don't think, we know that the night starts, when does the day begin in Judaism? Actually begins at night. Right? Shabbat begins at night. We just had Rosh Chodesh, Bet Sivan begins at nightfall. But for the purposes of Birkat Torah, the night follows on from the day. Halayla holech achar hayom shava. And therefore, he says, Eino tzarech lachzor levarech. Person does not need to go and make a new Birkat Torah, calls man shelo yashan, so long as he has not gone to sleep. So based on that, says the Magen Avraham, we can extrapolate. It sounds like there what the Shulchan Aruch is saying is so long as you haven't gone to sleep, you don't need to say a new bracha. So you don't go to sleep at night, comes to the next morning, you still don't need to say a new bracha. So the Magen Avraham is a little bit puzzled by this. Magen Avraham actually says, therefore, we don't accept that diuk in Yud Aleph. The Shulchan Aruch seem to go like Rabbeinu Tam, and he says you should say a new bracha. Rabbi Kenigsberg says no. He says really the Shulchan Aruch holds that it actually goes by hefsek. What he said before. When a new day comes, you haven't slept, you can't say a new bracha. If you can't say a new bracha when the new day kicks in, why didn't we say that you should say a bracha after you slept during the day? Well, there we have the minhag. There we're worried about Rabbeinu Tam because there might be a chashash bracha levatala, meaning it's still machloka rishonim. So we actually go. It says Rabbi Kenigsberg, Shulchan Aruch is going lekula in both directions. Whenever I have a doubt, I'm not sure if because the new day hasn't kicked in, or because I've had a hefsek, but maybe it's not that. He says we don't say new bracha. So according to Rabbi Kenigsberg, the way the Shulchan Aruch Paskins is, you slept during the day, you had a hefsek, doesn't matter. You had your bracha in the morning, and that's enough. You get to the next day when you didn't sleep at night. Okay, but now you didn't have a hefsek, so we're worried maybe there also you're not required to say a bracha. So therefore, that is how Rabbi Kenigsberg understands. But what is the solution? Says Rabbi Kenigsberg, a brilliant idea. He says there is a way in which you would be obligated to say Birkat Torah according to everybody. Mima nafshach. And what is that? He says if you take a nap the day before Erev Shavuot, right? So the day before you sleep during the day. Then what happens? So when it gets to the next morning, so a person sleeps on Shavuot is on Thursday night. So a person slept during the day on Thursday, and then did not sleep on Thursday night. Now we get to Friday morning, right? So if we say that you are required to say a new bracha because it's the next day, we're not worried about whether you slept or not. So you need to say a new bracha anyway. If we say that the bracha is dependent not on being a new day, but on the fact that you slept, okay, so you didn't sleep in the night, but you slept the day before, and according to that opinion, you would have been required to say the brachot when you woke up. So mima nafshach. Either way, you can say the bracha in the morning. So says Rabbi Kenigsberg, and that is the eitzah. If a person takes sleep as a shenat keva on the day on erev Yom Tov, aside from the fact that will help you to stay up throughout the night and have the energy, but you also get the added benefit of being able to say Birkat Torah lekulayam. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Amar Tzakadosh Baruch Hu Nizakot Yisrael Yifirach B'Alem Torah Mitzvot Shnei Ma'adanei Chafetz Ma'an Tzedko Yagdil Torah V'Yadil.